Hey everybody, welcome to week 5. Based on your papers and some of the inspiration I got from them, I thought we'd start off a little bit differently this week. So I have a clip for you to watch.
Power is a curious thing, my lord. 3 great men sit in a room, a king, a priest, and a rich man. Between them stands a common sellsword. Each great man bids the sellsword kill the other 2. Who lives, who dies. Power resides where men believe it resides. It's a trick, a shadow on the wall. And a very small man can cast a very large shadow.
A lot of your papers dealt with that concept of power that video talks about. You know, who holds the power? Where does power ultimately come from? So I thought I'd throw that in to shake things up a little bit. Before we get to a discussion about power, though, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping matters. First off, with your rough drafts, try to turn those in as you can, but I'm opening and extending the deadline for those. So just make sure you turn something in for those as soon as you can. I know it's a lot of work, but I think I can offer you really good feedback by doing that. I can also give you more points that count towards your grade, so your grade doesn't rely almost exclusively on your thought papers and your final wiki project. I've posted on Blackboard instructions for the final rough draft for the conclusion section. I've also posted instructions for the graduate students for the extra section that they have to do, the research proposal. And in the next couple of days, I'll post a final rubric for how I will grade your wiki. That final rubric will be based on what I've already put on Blackboard for your rough drafts. I'll just assign points to it. The only other housekeeping matter I have is just make sure that you stay on top of the thought papers. Stay on top of the readings. We've only got a week and a half of readings left. I hope you've gotten a lot out of those. I hope you've learned quite a bit. What is power and who holds power? We'll look at some specific comments that you guys made in your thought papers a little bit later. But I wanted to address some of the things that went on in the discussion board. First off, when you guys talked about user-generated content, that question of power came up a lot. You know, who actually holds the power in those situations? Is it the journalists that run the sites, or is it the audience that's submitting the comment? And how do we resolve that power? One of the biggest practical questions that was asked is it enough just to give those audience members that submit something to our sites credit? Or do we even need to give credit? I think that was asked as an ethical question. Legally, we don't. Unfortunately, most of the things that we submit online become part of the public record. But ethically, I think it's really important that anyone who uses user-generated content talks to and gets permission from the audience. Because it's not just about filling pages. It's really about creating community and creating relationships with the audience. It's hard to have that relationship if the other side of it feels like you're stealing from them. There's also an interesting question that was brought up about photography and power. What happens when you've got legions of audience members with high-quality cameras in their pockets as part of their smartphones? Do we lose some of the power as journalists because of that? On the discussion board, I posted a lot of links to what happened in Chicago when the Chicago Sun-Times laid off its entire photo staff. Why weren't they able to just use their reporters with their iPhones and audience comments to supplement photography for the paper? I think that goes back to the question of why journalists are still important right now, and why journalists are needed now more than ever. A good photojournalist isn't just somebody with a camera who happens to be on the scene and gets a lucky image. A good photojournalist spends a lot of time, has a good eye, can really encapsulate and tell a story in just one image, and creates images that you want to spend time with. User-generated content is important. We need to solicit it, we need to use it as we receive it. But we can't relinquish our roles as journalists. We need to be the standard bearers and the advocates for ethics and responsibility in journalism. And we, frankly, know how to tell a story better than most of our audience members. All right, on to your thought papers for this week. I think the Game of Thrones comparison is really appropriate because a lot of what you guys discussed had to do with the idea of power and who holds power on the internet. I think our first quote is especially important as it brings up some of the key points of the readings. I found that the common theme among the readings this week was power. When you post a video and draw viewers, is YouTube writing on your work for free, or are you writing on YouTube? You gain something of value, but so does the company. But who holds the power? That's a great question, and I'm not sure that I have an answer. And part of me wonders if it really even matters. Lessig made a really strong point, I think, in the reading on hybrid economies, that if both people feel like they get something of value, it doesn't really matter who has the power. In fact, both people probably feel like they have the power. It becomes a mutual relationship where both parties are going to support the other. And that's what he says is the key to ensuring that hybrid economies work. That brings up kind of another point, though. What happens when business comes into this relationship? The identity of the internet is the free flow of information. However, anytime that businesses get involved, the search for the almighty dollar has the opportunity to hijack any ideological goals. That's why hybrid economies don't work. I think that author really captured it well. Business too much focuses on the bottom line, on what it takes to sell or how much money they can make, and not what value they're offering for their audience member. One of the other key important elements of the internet and to make sure these hybrid economies work is to keeping the internet free and open. To ensuring that power is shared, to create rules, but where do those rules come from? The takeaway from this week's readings is the importance of a free and open internet without control of companies or government. The internet is an open conversation for all, so all of the First Amendment rights should be applied. Internet consumers have made this clear by defying their government to continue tweeting and allowing the services of companies such as AOL to die out. Users enjoy the free openness of the internet and are likely to ensure it stays that way. When we talk about power, actually, this quote makes it seem like the power ultimately rests with the users. And I think that's a good point. And I think even from a business standpoint, that's the idea that we need to put out there. That you ultimately have control, even if we're secretly pulling the strings in the end. So where do the rules that we need for the internet to function come from? Well, I think they come from the users, and I think you guys seized on that with a couple of really good quotes from your papers. In a sense, internet freedom is a question of how the internet should be governed. In any case, principles of equality and sharing should serve as the guide for whatever policies, legal frameworks to preserve the founding principles of the internet and make full use of it, because they are also the zeitgeist of our time. I love that word zeitgeist, and I think it's really appropriate here because that captures how we use the internet and how we want to use it. That zeitgeist is we want to be free online. We don't want people telling us what to do. Yeah, in the back of our minds we think we also want some control and some rules and to know where we can find good content. And that's why it's important to give our audience that sense that they're free while still guiding them. As much as we want internet to be free, we also have to be aware that being free from law and regulations opens doors to the worst kind of internet predators. Whether we like it or not, guidelines and well-formed laws are very much needed in ensuring that our internet will continuously stay as our ideal virtual public sphere. I like this quote because I think it puts the burden of creating the rules on the audience. It recognizes that openness can create predators, but it doesn't say, let's have government come in and do that. And I always like to end on a positive note. I think this was a positive note specifically for journalists, telling journalists how they can use the web, how they can create the rules. And I think it segues into our readings for this week really well. As a journalist, we have given up some of our freedoms online because our online personas have to remain professional, and our created content needs to make sure that everyone associated with us looks good. So how do we deal with user content as journalists? I think we have to be willing to give up some of our freedom, to give up some of our control, to preserve our standing as journalists. And that professionalism is what you can trust and what's going to bring you back to us and to our content rather than to other things that you can get out there. The readings for this week all come from the same book. It's a book, a number of essays and research studies about participatory journalism and how specifically news organizations are adapting to it. After so many weeks of really theoretical readings, I wanted to have a real practical week for you. And that's why I chose most of these readings. And I think you'll see as you look at them that these are real concrete things that newsrooms are trying to do to work with their audiences and to build those communities that we've talked about. The other article, I know it's a little bit old, the Mark Doisa article from 2003 called The Web and Its Journalisms. But still, in the 10, 11 years since that's been published, I haven't seen a better description of what online journalism looks like. He did some really exhaustive research looking what was available then and coming up with a categorization system that really makes a lot of sense. It has two axes that we'll probably talk about a little bit next week. But pay special attention to that as you read it. That's all I have for this week then. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for your submissions on Blackboard and for your thought papers. If you have any questions, you know how to find me. Drop me an email and I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.